Welcome to Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham. It's a Monday. We're going to talk racing news with Rod Mullins. We'll talk John Force a little later in the show. Some good news with John Force in his health situation after his crash in Richmond a few weeks ago. We'll start, though, with NASCAR and a rainy Sunday in Chicago. I don't know, Rod, if what we saw towards the end of the race was a first or just a first in a long time, but a racing against the clock. I don't think I've ever seen that. That was interesting to see.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. I was
Never
kind of, I was impressed with it. I just thought it was nice. Of course, you can't race in street lights in Chicago. They didn't have a lighting system or anything like that. But yeah, NASCAR made the call to go ahead and call the race, say at 8:20 their time. And so that would have been 9:20 our time. And so we're waiting here for the countdown to come off. And then there it is, right after it hits double zeros all the way across. The next thing you know is they've got it on the clock. The clock is off, and you have 2 laps to go. You've got to be able to finish those 2 laps. And then when you finish that last lap, you're declared the winner out of it.
I think they may have stumbled into something there for a future race. Perhaps it was neat seeing the clock up there, like you're used to in the stick and ball sports and stuff. So, yeah, we had that. We had a winner for the first time in a while in Alex Bowman. We had a crash towards the end with Kyle Larson that looked a little scary, considering there were, and that was in, what was that, the turn 6 where there had been
turn
a couple
6,
other
treacherous
crashes.
turn 6 is what I would call it. So
There were those tires set up there, and we saw a couple of guys crash into those tires, but then he crashed and kind of didn't hit the tires. So, boy, a lot going on there with all that yesterday. We've kind of already started getting into it, but break it down for us.
Well, we also had, an incident that happened between our race winner and Bubba Wallace, which I'll talk about too. That's got to be explained a little bit here. But, this was a race that started out a lot of promise, going to be dry weather at least. That's the way it looked. They were hoping it was going to be a really good race as it started out yesterday. And then the system started moving in from the south, moving northeast. And when it came across there, right along the lakefront, you just might as well just guess. And this was the decision that a lot of these drivers had to make at the beginning part of this race when it started with a little bit of some drizzle and a little bit of rain. It was either go out on slicks or go out on the wet weather tire. Some teams went out on the wet weather tire. Some teams chose to go with the slicks, which ultimately, if they went to full speed, they were going to be scooting all over the place. Some of the teams had to opt back in for the wet weather tire. But this was a race that we thought at one point that Shane Van Gisbergen was going to win at this race again. He was starting to move up through the field. He had actually got up to the front. He had taken a spot away from Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs there, that they were running close to the front. And then he has an accident when the rain and the downpour starts. He has an accident that takes him out, and then thus the chance of a back-to-back win for him kind of goes out the window. But there is some comfort in it. He did win on Saturday afternoon in the Xfinity Series when they ran the street course. So it was a mixed bag for a lot of these drivers. And there for a while, we thought Kyle Larson was going to, have at least a fair chance at winning this race. And then next thing you know, he hits the tire barrier. I forget how many 1,000 pounds they said that those concrete barriers were, but he managed to go, it seemed like almost go underneath the tire barriers, then hit the concrete wall, and a very hard hit. And, the first thing I think he was hoping for was to pull that car out and everything was going to be okay. But once you got that car pulled out, it was damaged beyond belief. I mean, the toe end, the front end was broken in places. It pretty much sealed his fate of what was going to happen. But it ended up, his teammate ends up winning the race and making a move to go out in front ahead of Josh Hand there towards the end of the race. And, then you have the situation of where you beat Tyler Reddick out. Tyler Reddick was coming and charging there toward the very end, right about the time that the clock ticked down to 0, and tried to make his move, but he just didn't have what he needed.
Yeah, Reddick, he had that little bump into the wall on one of the later turns in the last lap. He even talked about it afterwards. He was asked about what happened there in that last lap, and he kind of was silent for an uncomfortable few seconds and just he said basically I just screwed up. I mean,
Yeah.
because he had cut a lead that had you I want to say it was a 3 or 4 second lead down to about 1.2 seconds.
Right.
And man, I mean, because Bowman, understandably, I think, with his big lead and you're in those last two laps, you're
Hmm.
probably being a little conservative there. Hey, these are tight corners here. I don't want to hit anything. I don't want to do what he ended up doing.
Right.
And so, he's letting off the throttle a little bit. And then yeah, that ended the race right there pretty much for Reddick.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that I kind of looked at it and I almost could swear that he had tears in his eyes because this was something that was so close to him that he had a chance at pulling off this win. And like you said, he just looked at the camera and just said, basically, I screwed up. And this is one of those things that happens in NASCAR, wins, whether they're on a street course, whether they're on a road course, whether they're oval, it doesn't make any difference. When you make a mistake and you slip up there toward the very end of the race, it's one of those things that can cost you before it's over with. But hey, I mean, I'm just going to tell you this. I'm just surprised Alec Bowman. He was off the radar on this race almost all week. Nobody had been thinking about him except he had been placing. Had some good numbers of placing. We're in the top 10 and so forth, but he ended an 80 race drought, and he almost sounded like Tim Richmond after it was all said and done. Because quote, the last time we won, we really didn't get to celebrate. We're going to drink so much damn bourbon tonight, as he said, who clinched his spot in the playoffs. It's going to be a bad deal, as he went on. I'm probably going to wake up naked on the bathroom floor again. That's just a part of this deal sometimes. End quote.
Hey, that's he's being honest there. That's a good thing. So bad luck now. 2 straight years, the Sunday race in Chicago has rain. It's not Chicago's fault, obviously, just one of those
Right.
bad breaks. But we had talked about this for the last week or two leading up to the race that this race is not on the schedule for the near future, at least for
Mhm.
NASCAR. What's the sense? Is this something that we may see revisited in the future?
We may see it revisited in the future. I know that there was some talk yesterday of the mayor speaking at the drivers' meeting, big drivers' meeting before everything started. And the mayor, the new mayor there in Chicago, was pledging his support for this race. He loves it. He just loves it, thinks it's a great way to bring people in. You would have people say that, they had a jam-packed crowd there, but the rain dispersed a lot of people as it went on. But to me, I think the thrill of it, I told my wife while we were watching the race yesterday, I think the thrill would be watching the race from one of the high rises as they come around through there at Grant Park and coming through there at the lakefront. I think that would just be just fantastic to be able to have that kind of point of view and be able to see that. But it's one of those things that's on hold right now. I don't know if they're going to go back to it. There's maybe talk that they may go to another track or another road course or street course before it's over with. I know that there is talk. There's some people saying, why not bring it to the west coast of Florida and put it over in St. Pete over near Tampa? That's one idea. There are people talking about maybe getting them out in California, out in Venice, out there, and being able to race. They usually have a street race out there. It's anybody's guess right now. I think the successful part of it has been that you've had a non-traditional NASCAR driver win the first race. Then you have a more, I don't know, more traditional kind of NASCAR driver win the second race. But, still there's room for some improvement there. I think that they could probably change some things and make it a little bit more of a more fun race. Maybe do something about timing wise. I know they're trying to avoid the heat because the heat was one thing that they were talking about, but then, what happens? It rains. So we're just going to have to wait and see on this. Just have to find out what they're going to do and how they're going to place this. NASCAR has had to foot a lot of this bill when they went to Chicago. Chicago's put up so much money, but Chicago technically not in a very good financial shape right now. And so NASCAR has had to help them out on a lot of things, considering to try to help them get going. And that's what we've had for the end result after two races there in Chicago.
After all these years of covering local government in addition to sports,
Mm-hmm.
local and state government in addition to sports, I'm just impressed that a city like Chicago, the size of Chicago, one of the the biggest three cities in this country and one of the biggest cities in the world,
Mhm.
and figure out a way to, I mean, you got to put all these barriers up to protect
Yep.
those buildings in the middle of a town, and you got to close streets and close parkways and interstates and all this kind of stuff. And the just the logistics that goes into this, the months of planning that goes into it, and then the weeks of work that goes into it to bring it off. That's impressive. That'd be
Mhm.
impressive in any city. I mean, on a much, much, much smaller scale. I remember when the city of Waynesboro, where I'm based, years ago was involved in the Tour du Pont. That
Mhm.
the effort to do the bike race, kind of like the Tour de France, and just Waynesboro's small participation in that seemed like there was months of work. And so I can only imagine what it took to bring this off in Chicago. So, if the mayor is behind it, that's a huge get. That's
Mhm.
that's saying, hey, I'm willing to throw the machinery of government behind this. We want to do
Yep.
this again. That makes it a lot easier for NASCAR.
Yeah, I think it does too. I think it was a great shot in the arm, at least for NASCAR, at least hearing that coming from the mayor there. And for some of these drivers, I think they want to come back again. They want to race this course. Some of them didn't have as bad a time this round as they did last year. I know that Kyle Busch had a lot of troubles last year. He ended up finishing ninth out of the whole fray, but you had some others in there that didn't end up winning or didn't end up being at the top like they'd hoped to. Chase Elliott's for one. Chase Elliott came in 21st. To give you a brief rundown, Bowman was first, Reddick second, Gibbs was third, Joey Hand driving for RFK Racing was fourth, Michael McDowell in a Ford, who's matter of fact going to a Chevrolet next year. He places fifth. Ricky Stenhouse had a great run yesterday. William Byron, then Kyle Busch and Ryan Blaney. And then also just to mention to you too, Bubba Wallace finished 13th, but not before delivering more than what would be considered a love tap to Alex Bowman at the end of the race yesterday. And Alex Bowman apologized. He said, I'm sorry. He said, I did that. He said, I just really, he said, I don't know what came over me and stuff. He said, I really hope those guys will understand, I'm sorry over what happened. But clearly on the end of the race and the cool off point, Bubba comes slamming in there and slams up against him door to door and then goes on. And a lot of people have already been saying, hey, are they gonna penalize him? Well, we don't know just yet. It'll either be tomorrow or Wednesday. They could, safety wise, because of not really paying attention to the safety factor of it, slowing down there toward the end of the race. But this was frustrating on Bubba Wallace because he had dropped back there for quite a ways, and then he managed to fight and claw and get himself back up in the front. You had some other good drivers yesterday that had some bad luck as well. Denny Hamlin ended up finishing 30th out of this race, and then going down the list, Josh Berry finished 36. Christopher Bell, who was clearly dominating this race at one time, he ends up finishing 37th. And I guess the surprise, AJ Allmendinger, he had an accident, only managed to finish about 37 laps, I think, of the whole thing. He ends up finishing 38th, and this is one of his pride and joy type of tracks. So it was Allmendinger, Larson, and Van Gisbergen, who finished up the bottom of the pack right there.
Let's go to some off the track news. It was also from this weekend, or at least
Mhm.
we learned of it this weekend. Hailie Deegan, the rookie who trying to make her name in Xfinity Series racing, her and her team parting ways. Give us some more on this.
Well, it had been talked about there for a little bit of Joey Logano maybe going to sub in for Hailie Deegan this past weekend. But AM Racing parted ways with the driver effective immediately as they announced it early on Monday morning. This wasn't even mentioned during the race and everything going on in Chicago, but here it happened. It happened here at Chicago after Chicago. And so the quote as it came from the press release says, AM Racing and Hailie Deegan have decided to part ways effective immediately. The team's statement read, we're grateful for Hallie's contributions and dedication as the driver of the number 15 Ford Mustang during her time with the race team. We wish her the best in her future endeavors and look forward to her continued success on and off the track. So what you're saying is, in a nutshell, is she didn't get the job done. We've got to release her because we need to find somebody else that's going to at least have some finishes in some of the races. And we were talking about this before we went on to record. She's 22 years old. She drove this car for the first 17 races of the season. This was her rookie campaign, but she only managed to have an average finish of 26.8 with just 4 results of 20th or better. She's 28th right now in season-long standings, dropping a spot after sitting out Saturday's Loop 110 race in Chicago. And so Joey Logano piloted the car this past weekend. They're going to make a decision on where they're going to go from there. And Hailie Deegan, she came out with her own press release, and she said, at this point, I've got to go, and I need to look at what I'm doing, because beginning this season, I had a lot of excitement. There was a lot of things I was hoping for that was going to take me in my next step from NASCAR Xfinity Series, but it's something I've been working toward. But with that being said, myself and AM Racing will be parting ways, and the only thing I'm focused on right now is getting back to being competitive. In a way, it kind of reminds you of this Frankie Muniz thing that kind of happened here a little bit earlier, where Frankie Muniz walked away from the car. Walked away from the Xfinity car. He drove a truck here, I think, about 2 weeks ago, and he's managing to kind of, get himself comfortable again with where he's at. And it's a thing of performance. It's, that's the bottom line. That's what drives this. It's a money-making sport. You have to be able to perform in order to get advertising dollars, in order to get sponsor dollars and things like that. And if you're not producing it, you're not going to be getting the bucks. So what did they say in the movie The Right Stuff? No bucks, no Buck Rogers. So that's essentially what it is in a nutshell in the racing industry.
Yeah, she had been third in the ARCA series in 2020. I mean, she had promised. She was in the truck series, average finish of 21st, her first year in the truck series. Kind of looked like she was ready to make that move up to Xfinity, maybe just a little too fast.
Right.
But she's still young, but maybe at a crossroads, even being young, no doubt, a lot of stuff. We'll be watching her in the next, few months, see if she gets another ride, whether it be an Xfinity or truck series or back into ARCA.
She managed, I'll tell you this, she managed also to get a starting spot in Tony Stewart's All-Star Racing Experience, that Superstar Racing Experience that now has been folded up and collapsed, and everything has been, I think, absorbed by IROC now, as they're getting ready to start this kind of IROC type series again. But she was doing okay in that. I wouldn't say that she was doing great, because she was up against some tough competition with some of these drivers, some of them former NASCAR drivers, some of them current NASCAR drivers, but she was kind of holding her own there. And I think she was using that as a little bit more experience, but it just didn't last long. She wasn't able to go and continue with the series this year since they shut it down. And so we say goodbye to her right now, 17 races into the season, and wonder where she's going to end up.
So our last bit of news, we'll talk some John Force. We've talked about the NHRA legend who was injured, seriously injured in a crash in Richmond a few weeks ago in an NHRA race. We got maybe some good news. Well, it's definitely good news and some new positive trends in the right direction regarding his health. Give us the latest there, Rod.
Well, no speculation here. This is coming straight from the Force family of how everything is coming about. They've right now, of course, I think mentioned this last week, they've transferred him down to a neuro ICU unit where they are helping him kind of cope with some different things. And here it was, we got to the end of the week, and I think the thing that really jumped out at me was over the weekend, and I see a picture of John Force sitting there with that trademark smile on his face, holding his right hand up, and then surrounded by family there. Brittany's there, Courtney's there, his wife is there. Some of the grandkids are there too from one of the older daughters. This is incredible just to see the kind of rebound that he's came back. And here, Ashley Force wrote this, and this was on Instagram with a picture with her two sons there, and they're there in the picture with him. It says, "I don't know if I would have made it through these last 2 weeks in Virginia without my mom, my 3 sisters, and my Catholic faith. I'm so proud of my dad. He's such a fighter. He has a way to go still, but he's also his same old self at times, making us laugh, trying to give us chocolate pudding to the nurses, and worrying about whether or not, to stop worrying about him. The sweetest thing, though, according to Ashley Force, said that was early on when he was first talking, and he said, Jacob and Noah are my best friends, and that's her sons right there, the grandsons. And in that moment, she was overcome with so much relief that he would be able to recognize them when he finally got to see them, and they let him in, and they were sure glad to see him. And they've got big grins on their face in the Instagram picture that Ashley Force released on Instagram just here 19 hours ago. She put that up, and it was great to see. Uh, Courtney has talked about it a little bit. Brittany has talked a little bit more about it in her posts. You got to watch here. There's one thing that I did come across, and that was the fact that Brittany Force, I think, had said right about the time that this accident happened, she doesn't do one of the social medias, and I believe for some reason it's Facebook. I don't believe she does Facebook at all. And strangely enough, today, as I was going through some of this stuff to get ready for this afternoon, there's a Brittany Force page on Facebook, and somebody has jumped in and they have cloned it. They have taken off, put the pictures on there and stuff, and making it look like, that's the official page, but it's not the official page. I think she told some fans here several weeks ago, the only information, if you get it out of us, will be official coming from us as a family. And so that's what we've got. But hey, I think that's great that he's able to see the grandsons, be able to go, and he knew them. They said he's been cantankerous. They've had him walking up and down the hall at different times. But he wants to get up and go, but he still has what's left over, this traumatic brain injury. And so we've got a lot of people already saying, enjoy yourself, recuperate, and enjoy retirement. We'll just have to wait and see what John Force is going to plan. And for some reason, I think he's going to probably plan to go ahead and to step down probably as it goes on a little bit more, because 75 years old, I know he's a tough bird and everything, but after a while, you take too many hits to the head, you're not going to be thinking right. And there's times he told me a couple of years ago when I was there in the trailer, the hauler there at Bristol Dragway, he told me there's things sometimes, he said, I can't remember. He said, there's been some things, I've taken some hits before, I can't remember, had no idea how it happened. So that's one of those things that kind of scares you at that point, and you start saying to yourself, what if I don't know what's going on at this point, and say I slam my head against, a roll bar or something inside there protective for my safety, but I end up getting even worse before it's all said and done. Yeah, this is something that's what happened this past incident here at Richmond, and we're just hoping he's going to be on the mend, and he's just going to be back to his old self. That's what I want to see. I want to see him back to his old self.
You take the kind of hit he took in that crash. If you're 25 years old,
right?
That's a bad hit. That's
yeah.
That's going to have lifelong effects when you're young and vibrant. He's old and vibrant. I mean, he's an older guy and vibrant, but I mean, it's tough, and we're maybe more cognizant as a country right now. A lot of us, of course, individually have had people, family members, fathers, grandfathers, mothers, grandmothers, etc., whatever, who've suffered from issues with age, and we're seeing it now nationally with the discussion of our two presidential candidates. Those guys haven't even taken hard hits as far as we know, like John Force hitting a wall at 302 miles an hour. So there's still, obviously, if he does decide to hang up, I mean, he's, it's his decision, just like our presidential candidates are famously saying it's their decision, but it's his decision, whatever he does. But man, he's still's got a lot to offer, when he recovers as a team owner, and running the teams and putting his right people in place and that kind of thing, his daughter's team and everything else. So, I mean, it's not like he just has to ride off into the sunset. He can still be very active in NHRA if he decides to do that. But it certainly will be a long road to get back into the car for him, given what he's gone through.
I'll be honest with you, and this, I know we're not trying to go in any kind of political direction here or anything like that, but we have two candidates, of course, like you mentioned. I think this is his wake-up call. I think this is his wake-up call that just tells him right now, you've done everything, you've won, you've done all this stuff. Hey, I know you're trying to go and you're trying to build things for Brittany. You're trying to build things for Austin Prock. You're trying to build things for Robert Haight. And, Robert Haight and him, it's his former son-in-law. is what it is. But he still thinks a lot of Robert Height in the organization. And Robert Height has been off this season. But, you just kind of look at it, and I think the rest of the drivers are kind of saying, life just wouldn't be the same without John Force in one way or another. And I don't want to see the day that something like what happened at Richmond takes it away, just the same way that we had a wreck that took Dale Earnhardt away from us, just the same way that we had Adam Petty, who was a young and upcoming driver, and he loses his life. Kenny Irwin, I could go down the list. And then, of course, Dale Earnhardt Jr. talking about the many times that, he's banged his head and busted his head, and he didn't think anything about it, but now they say that the damage is there. And, he kind of wisely took a step back from doing this on a regular basis, still races, at times on the smaller circuit, on the car circuit or late models. But, I think that's mostly just to keep him satisfied is what he wants to do. Now, John Force may be racing a little bit later on. Who knows? But I think the family's going to have a say in that. I think he's going to finally probably make the decision to step away and see how this recovery goes. And we may never see him back in one of those cars again. But I know one thing: I've definitely been impressed with him. Sitting down and talking with him, just knowing what his work ethic is. Man alive, I'm just blown away by him. Just the way that he is got to be in everything. He's not a micromanager, but he's got to have a hand in everything he's doing with that race team to keep it going.
Broken bones can mend, but the head, we've learned so much about concussions, head injuries, and that kind of thing in the last 20 years. You don't want to mess around with that. Well, Rod, we will, of course, be looking forward to your coverage of the NASCAR racing this weekend. And then, of course, we'll be talking again next week. So thank you for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.